They had oil worth billions beneath their feet. Within a few years, they were being murdered for it. Shot, poisoned, blown up in their own homes, one family at a time, in broad daylight, while local authorities looked the other way. This is not fiction. This is not a movie plot. This happened in America in the 1920s, and it was hidden for nearly a century. This is the story of the Osage Nation, and it is one of the most shocking true stories in American history. The Osage, Osage in their own language, were one of the most powerful nations in the heart of North America. At their peak, their territory stretched across present-day Missouri, Arkansas, Kansas, and Oklahoma. Osage men averaged over 6 feet tall, among the tallest people in the world at the time. European explorers who first encountered them were astonished by their physical presence and their military power. They were hunters, farmers, and warriors. They hunted buffalo twice a year in massive communal hunts. They grew corn and beans in permanent villages. They were feared by neighboring nations and by European colonial powers alike. When French traders arrived in the late 1600s, the Osage quickly became the dominant trading power in the region, playing French, Spanish, and British interests against each other with remarkable skill. For over a century, no European power could establish a presence in the central part of North America without Osage cooperation. They were not victims of history. They were masters of it. In the 19th century, however, the Osage experienced relentless loss. Treaty after treaty stripped the Osage of their lands, pushed from Missouri, then Arkansas, then Kansas. Each time promised that the new land would be theirs forever. Each time, that promise was broken when settlers decided they wanted what the Osage had. By 1870, the Osage made a decision that would define their future. Rather than accept a small government reservation, they used their own money to purchase a large tract of land in what is now northeastern Oklahoma. Rocky, hilly, unwanted land that most settlers considered worthless. When they negotiated the purchase, the Osage insisted on one crucial provision. They retained the mineral rights beneath the surface. Nobody paid much attention to that detail at the time. They should have. In 1894, oil was discovered on Osage land. By the early 1900s, the Osage Reservation was sitting on one of the richest oil deposits in North America. Because the Osage owned the mineral rights collectively, every enrolled member received a share of the oil profits, called a head right. By the early 1920s, the Osage were among the wealthiest people in America. They built grand homes, bought automobiles, sent their children to the finest schools, hired staff, wore the latest fashions. And the world watched with envy, with resentment, and with something far more dangerous. Because head rights could be inherited. If an Osage person died, their head right passed to whoever they named as heir. Many Osage had married white settlers, and some of those settlers realized something. If their Osage spouse died, they would inherit the head right. And what followed became known as the Reign of Terror. Between 1921 and 1926, at least 24 Osage were murdered. Historians believe the true number was far higher. Shot in the head, poisoned slowly over months, blown up with nitroglycerin, pushed from moving vehicles. Behind many of these murders was one man, William Hale, a wealthy white rancher who had positioned himself as a trusted friend of the Osage. He systematically arranged marriages between his relatives and Osage head right holders, then arranged for those Osage to die. Local authorities did nothing. Many were corrupt, in the pay of Hale and his associates. Investigations went nowhere. Witnesses disappeared. The Osage appealed to the federal government for help. In 1925, the newly formed Bureau of Investigation sent agents to Oklahoma. The lead investigator was a former Texas Ranger named Tom White. What he uncovered was a conspiracy deeper and darker than anyone had imagined. An entire community terrorized and murdered while the authorities looked the other way. White went undercover. His agents gathered evidence over months. In 1926, William Hale was arrested and charged with murder. The trials that followed were some of the most dramatic in American legal history. Witnesses recanted under pressure, jurors were threatened, evidence disappeared. But eventually, William Hale was convicted and sentenced to life in prison. It was one of the first major cases successfully prosecuted by the Bureau of Investigation, a case that helped establish what would later become the FBI. But for the Osage, justice was incomplete. Most of the murders were never solved. Most of the killers were never charged. The full truth has only recently begun to emerge. In 2022, Martin Scorsese brought the story to the world with Killers of the Flower Moon, starring Leonardo DiCaprio and Robert De Niro. Millions of people saw it. Many had never heard of the Osage Nation before. The Osage had been trying to tell this story for decades. The Osage Nation today is a sovereign government based in Pawhuska, Oklahoma, with its own constitution, elected legislature, court system, and police force. The oil money, reduced from its 1920s peak but still flowing, continues. The Osage still hold their mineral rights. Head rights still exist, still passed through families, still providing income to enrolled members. Their language, Osage, nearly extinct by the late 20th century, is being revived. In 2013, the Osage Nation launched a major language program. Young Osage are learning the words their grandparents were punished for speaking. Their Inlanshka ceremonial dances, held every June in 3 Osage communities, have never stopped. Through the oil boom, through the murders, through decades of federal pressure, the dances continued. They continue today. The Osage survived 400 years of European contact, forced removal, cultural destruction, and deliberate murder. And they are still here, still sovereign, still dancing, still bringing their language back to life. The Osage were targeted because they had something everyone wanted: their land, their oil, their wealth. People tried to take it through law. When that failed, some tried to take it through murder. They failed. The Osage are still here. Their story is finally being told, and it deserves to be heard, not just as a true crime story, not just as a Hollywood film, but as the story of a people who refused to be erased. If this story moved you, share this video so more people can know the truth about the Osage Nation. Follow the page for more untold stories of Native American history. And tell me in the comments, which Native American tribe do you want to see next?